Hello, welcome to Hope 2021 and our evening event. Whether you've been coming along all week or this is your first time tuning in, we are so glad you're here, even if it is from a very social distance.
We hope you've enjoyed the music and you've had time to settle in and get comfy. Whether you're watching with your flatmates, over a watch party, or by yourselves, we're so excited you've joined us. We hope that you're staying safe and well, and would also like to reassure you that this is all being produced in accordance with government guidelines. Before we get stuck in, we'll introduce ourselves. My name's Joanna. I'm a third-year nursing student at Queen Margaret.
Hi, I'm Christian. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Edinburgh. This event is one of many in a week-long series run by the Christian unions from the universities in Edinburgh. Throughout this week, we have looked at life's big questions, and we will continue to explore these tonight. This evening, we'll be thinking about hope for my shameful self. Can we ever be truly accepted? To help us think through this question, we have Kenny Robertson, who will give us a short talk. Kenny has worked with students across the country for a number of years and is currently based in St Andrews.
We're so glad to have Kenny with us, and I'm just going to invite him onto stage so we can get to know him a bit better. Hi, Kenny. We've just got a few questions for you.
Sure.
Have you picked up any fun hobbies over lockdown?
Yes, so as a family, our new hobby is having a dog. So we got a dog just 2 days after the schools closed in March. And he's been a real joy to have. He's a Labradoodle, so he's also ridiculously good looking. And it's been brilliant to be forced to be out of the house twice a day, taking for a walk. And it's also been really good for my mental health as well.
Yeah, you've mentioned you're struggling with mental health over the week. How are you getting on with that?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for asking. So I was diagnosed with depression back in 2016 and was really ill with it for a couple of years. I was really in a bad way. I was involved in pastoring a church at the time and had to step back from that completely. And it was pretty grim. But actually just through finding the right medication and through some very helpful counselling as well, I've managed to probably be 90% better now. So for the most part, really well. And actually, lockdown has been okay for it.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah. This evening, you're talking about shame, and you'll explain a bit about its relationship with mental health. Yeah. Have you got any advice for people who are currently struggling with their mental health?
Yes. Firstly, lots of sympathy for you if you're struggling with mental health, and you're not on your own. It's entirely understandable given our current circumstances, because some of you actually may have previously been perfectly healthy mentally and are finding it hard. So lots of sympathy for you, and it's really a statement about the circumstances that we're in. It's particularly hard at the moment. I think there are three fundamental things as a basis for recovering from poor mental health. I think all three are really important. Firstly is medication, secondly is counselling, and the third one is considering the spiritual aspect to life. So go to your GP. If you have a flatmate, by the way, who struggles with mental health, one of the hardest things to do is that first meeting with a GP. It's one thing booking an appointment, it's another thing going. So what about going with them to the doctors, at least getting them to the door? So go and see your GP. They're there, they want to hear from you, they want to help. Secondly, so talk to your GP about medication. Secondly, consider counselling. I think it's a really, really helpful thing. There is no shame in seeking out counselling. Your student services will be able to help with that, finding them. It's a really, really helpful thing to do. And lots of people who have fine mental health and who struggle deeply go to counselling for all sorts of different reasons. So don't be ashamed about searching that out. And then thirdly, I would say consider the spiritual aspect to it. I think Christianity has the best resources for helping us cope with our shame and the challenges of life in a general sense. And the Bible is actually amazingly resourceful for that. It gives us a vocabulary for our challenges, for our difficulties, for our depression, through a book called the Psalms, a collection of songs that cover the whole of the emotional health of a life of a person, but also considering the person of Jesus. Jesus was someone who's described as being familiar with suffering and acquainted with grief, and he walked alongside people who are the outcasts in society. And he understands us far more than we even understand ourselves. So I would definitely recommend looking into that side of things as well.
Thanks so much, Kenny. Before we hand over to Kenny to give his talk, we're going to read a passage from the Bible. This comes from Mark, which is an account of Jesus' life written by one of his followers. The verses will come up on the screen if you'd like to follow along. Mark chapter 5. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered round him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed round him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I can touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned round in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering."
I'd like to start this evening by reading to you from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Now, I'm aware that reading Harry Potter in public might be a slightly contentious thing to do, but whatever your view of J.K. Rowling, I'm sure we can all agree that Harry has been someone who has really caught the public imagination in recent years, and is someone who I think many of us will be able to relate to. So let me read to you from the Order of the Phoenix. Arthur Weasley has just been bitten by Voldemort's snake, and Harry had a vision of this, so was able to do something to help save Arthur. So everybody thinks Harry's a hero, but he's not so sure. He walked into the dark pantry. Without preamble, Harry told his godfather every detail of the vision he had had, including the fact that he himself had been the snake who had attacked Mr. Weasley. When he paused for breath, Sirius said, "Did you tell Dumbledore this?" "Yes," said Harry, "but he didn't tell me what it meant. He doesn't tell me anything anymore." "I'm sure he would have told you if it was anything to worry about," said Sirius steadily. But that's not all," said Harry. "Sirius, I think I'm going mad. For a couple of seconds there, I thought I was a snake. I felt like one. My scar really hurt when I was looking at Dumbledore. Sirius, I wanted to attack him. It was like something rose up inside me, like there's a snake inside me." "You need to sleep," said Sirius firmly. "You're in shock, Harry. You're blaming yourself for something you only witnessed. And it's lucky you did witness it, or Arthur..." And left the pantry, leaving Harry standing alone in the dark. This evening, I'd like us to talk about shame. Shame has re-emerged in our culture in different ways. There's the very public picture of shame, the thing called public shaming, when someone gets cancelled. And of course, the author of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, is an example of this. But the other wider experience of shame in our culture is the private version. And often it is at the heart of many of the mental health struggles we have around us. And in this book, in the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter struggles with shame in various different ways. On the surface, it seems, in this particular chapter, he's worried about whether or not he's done something wrong. That's what it seems like on the surface. But deeper than that, he's worried about whether or not he is something wrong. Am I a hero? or am I a villain? What is shame? Well, as you know, the second most viewed TED Talk of all time is about shame. And in it, Brené Brown defines shame as the self-judgment or the tendency to say to yourself, I'm not enough. And you fill in the blank there with whatever thought comes to your mind. Maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not thin enough, or I'm not strong enough. I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes. Now, shame is in some ways very similar to guilt, but it's also quite different from guilt, because guilt is about doing something wrong, but shame is about being something wrong. So guilt is about what you've done, but shame is about who you are. Worrying that you aren't enough. That's what Harry Potter is an example of. He demonstrates that. Let me give you a physical picture of shame. So shame has been a significant part of my experience with depression. And if I'm in a situation where I feel under pressure, or something has triggered my spiral into my black hole, I curve in on myself. So I stoop, my head drops, my eyes avoid contact, my head explodes on the inside but heats up on the outside. I want to hide, I want to retreat or escape from the conversation or the situation. And everything within me screams, I'm not enough. I feel about 2 inches tall. Maybe you know what that feels like. And those of us who struggle with our mental health probably know that all too well. But so does everyone else. Because it is a universal human experience. We all feel shame, though maybe we're aware of it to different degrees. Shame can be caused by all sorts of life experiences. Maybe it's something external, like being bullied or abused or mocked by someone you trusted. Or maybe it's internal. Maybe you can't reach the standards that you set for yourself, or that your parents have set for you, or that you see on your Instagram feed. And you know, much of the time, the shame that we feel is not our fault. It's often an indictment on the wrong ways that people have treated us, or the impossible demands of society around us. But what's so vicious about it is that often the ways that we respond to shame only make it worse. The saying is true: shamed people shame people. So we try and perfect ourselves. We become hypercritical of everyone else. We hide, we run away, we disconnect from others. We pretend it doesn't affect us because it's too painful to admit. But these only compound the shame, because then we become ashamed of our wrong responses. Shame is just so deep and so complex and so painful. Is there any hope in the midst of it? Well, opponents might think that the last place to look for help with shame is Christianity. But actually, the opposite is true. Christianity has so much to say about shame. And in particular, people like the woman in the narrative we just heard help us hugely. And I want to show you for a few minutes 3 things: her experience of shame, her experience of Jesus, and then thirdly, how that can help us find healing from our shame. So firstly, her experience of shame. Let me read to you from the passage that Joanna just read to us. It says, a woman was there who'd been subject to years. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. This woman experienced multiple layers of shame. It's probable that her 12-year illness was some form of ongoing menstrual disorder. So her shame would have included significant physical distress, There was a religious element to it. She would have been ritually unclean. This would have led to social isolation. People would want to stay away from her for fear of being contaminated. It condemned her to a life of poverty because she'd spent all her money on treatment. And it's highly possible that she was subject to abuse by the physicians who were supposed to be caring for her. So she could well have experienced emotional and mental shame too. No marriage, no intimacy, no money, no friendships, no hugs, no self-worth. And then there's the shame that's brought on by this situation. She stops Jesus as he is rushing to save a dying girl. She risks with her uncleanness contaminating the crowd and a religious leader, Jesus. So no wonder she desperately wants to remain secret. But she's willing to risk it because this is the only card she's got left. He is her last hope. But then she experiences Jesus. And firstly, she's powerfully healed. Remember where we've come the last couple of evenings. One storm, 6,000 demons, but one word from Jesus. They're totally under his control. And here, he doesn't even say a word. She just touches his cloak, and immediately her illness is healed. And then Jesus turns round and asks, "Who touched my cloak?" This is the woman's worst nightmare come true. He calls her out in public. And for anybody buried in shame, this is the one thing that you cannot cope with. And then he speaks to her. And he says, "Daughter." The key that unlocks her prison is that very first word. It is loaded with significance. Do you know, this is the only time in the Bible where Jesus calls somebody daughter. And in the Bible, being a daughter means to be deeply treasured. It is a position of great honor. I don't know your experience of your parents or of being their child. And maybe the word daughter or son is painful for you because the potential in that word for acceptance, for unconditional love, for being treasured has not become a reality. But when Jesus calls you daughter or son, it absolutely does. You see, he doesn't talk to her publicly to shame her, but he does it to publicly honor her. You see, if she had just touched his cloak and then snuck away, run away secretly without anybody knowing about it, she may have been healed of her illness, but she would still have carried all those stigmas that she had. But Jesus publicly declares her to be accepted, to be healed, to be freed from her shame and at peace. And so by doing that, he heals her not only of her sickness, but also of her shame. So what about us? Well, do you know, Brené Brown says that we are freed from shame as we share our worst, but yet know welcome nonetheless. Maybe you know the joy of a friendship where you can be weak and vulnerable and honest, and yet be totally loved. But it's hard to maintain those relationships, especially in a lockdown, in a fragmented society that we live in. And even if you have a friendship like that, there are aspects of shame that seem impossible to share with others or even try and explain. And that's because only Jesus can truly free us from our shame. He says that if you bring your shame to him, he will give you freedom from that shame and lasting honor and unconditional love. He frees us from it firstly by saying that the things done to us that have caused our shame are wrong. And he says that one day he will return to this world to bring justice and to hold those things to account. But secondly, he says that the wrong things we have done that have shamed others are also wrong and should also be held to account. But if you read on in the Gospel of Mark to Jesus' death on the cross, you'll discover that Jesus himself offers to pay for it. Jesus experienced a painful death for us. He was stripped naked, he was beaten, he was spat on, he was mocked, and he was sentenced to die by crucifixion, which was a Roman invention designed to humiliate the victim and to dissuade others from following their example. Jesus was publicly shamed. But Jesus was the most powerful man who ever lived. Why did he allow that to happen? Whose shame was he dealing with as he died? Ours. The shame that we deserve for our shaming of others, he willingly took in our place. The justice we should be held to account for, he willingly took on himself and paid for. And we can give it to him to be dealt with once and for all. He offers us justice, but he also offers us forgiveness. And he also offers us honor. The Bible has an amazing picture for this. We feel like we are so clothed in shame. And Jesus asks us to come to him with it. And when we do that, we don't experience rejection. But what Jesus actually does is he takes our filthy cloak of shame off of our shoulders and he nails it to the cross. And then he takes the cloak of perfection off his own shoulders and puts it around ours. And he puts his arm around us and he presents us to his Father in heaven, who then welcomes us as his own precious daughter or son, and welcomes us and loves us as much as he loves Jesus, because we're wearing his cloak. And he gives us a life of peace with him in his family forever. Will you know this freedom from shame this evening? You know, your shame can be lifted immediately. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for us to step out of the shackles of our shame. But you can begin to be free from shame tonight. All Jesus asks is for you to come to him, to bring to him the shame that others have caused you, and to acknowledge the shame that you have brought upon others, maybe even the shame that you have brought upon yourself. And then know that he can deal with it. And when we bring that to him, he says that we can be fully forgiven and fully freed from it. If you would like that, then just as I have done the last couple of nights, I'm going to ask you to pray with me. I'll say a prayer where we just say that we acknowledge, we bring the shame that we have experienced, that we acknowledge the shame that we have caused to others. We say sorry and we ask for his peace. And if that's something that you want, then why don't you just say these words privately in your own heart along with me. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much, Father God, that you offer us this unconditional welcome. Jesus, thank you that you have the power to remove us from our shame. It goes so deep within us, but yet your love goes deeper still. And Father, I just want to acknowledge the shame that maybe others have brought upon me. I want to bring that to you and ask you to deal with it. I want to acknowledge the shame that maybe I have brought upon others, maybe the shame that I have brought upon myself. I bring that to you as well, and I say sorry. And I ask for your forgiveness. Jesus, please would you fill me with your peace. May I be freed from this prison of shame. May I know your unconditional love and welcome your arms around me. May I know the love of your Heavenly Father, and may I know a life of peace from now on. Amen. Now, as I've said last night as well, if you have just prayed that prayer, I really want to encourage you, please tell somebody. You can fill in the contact form. Joanna and Christian will explain some of that after I've finished. Come and join us on Zoom. Or maybe if you've got a friend who invited you along tonight, why don't you just tell them? They would love to hear from you and know what you think of this, and would love to help you further. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Kenny. If anything that has been said has left you wanting to chat with someone or ask further questions, we would be happy to help. Using the discussion questions, you can speak to the person who invited you or someone you know from one of the CUs. Also, right after this, we are hosting a call with Kenny and some CU members, to which you're very welcome to join. If you would like to come along to ask questions or have a chat, then please message the Hope 2021 Facebook page. We also have a form you can fill in so you can get in touch with another student at your uni who is a part of.
This event is part of a week-long series run by the Christian unions from across Edinburgh. Tomorrow at the same time, there'll be another talk from Kenny, this time on the topic, Hope for Tomorrow, Can We Be Positive About the Future? We'd love to see you again for this. Tomorrow is also our last day of events, so make sure to tune in. You could start the day at our breakfast show on Instagram Live at 9 a.m, which is followed by a Story of Hope video with a Christian sharing a bit about how knowing Jesus has changed their life. In the afternoon at 12 p.m, you can join the international Zoom call to explore the question, Looking for Home, What Does It Mean to Belong? At 1 p.m, there will be a Question of Hope video where our speaker will look at the question, Where is God in a climate crisis?
We do have a lot going on, and if you didn't catch all of it, then you can head over to our social media pages to find all the relevant information. Click on the links below to give us a follow. We'd really love to see you again at one or all of these events. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're really happy that you could tune in.
Good night, have a good rest of your evening, and see you tomorrow.